All right, you guys, so in this video, I want to share some ideas on how we can rebuild LA to be safer and more fireproof after the most recent fires that affected the Palisades and Altadena. So, the first sort of concern to address is, well, should we be building here? Okay, there's a lot of people on the internet that just said, you shouldn't build there, it's too dangerous, whatever. The problem I see with not rebuilding is that you're just going to shift the burden deeper into the city. Okay, so instead of Altadena being vulnerable, now Pasadena will be vulnerable. Instead of the Pacific Palisades being vulnerable, now Santa Monica will be vulnerable. So I think what we need to do is look at it as the foothill communities are sort of like the epidermis layer or the front lines that's protecting the city. And we should rebuild it in such a way where it has the infrastructure to stop these fires that spread. Okay, I want to start with this video from Joe Rogan where he talks about his conversation with a firefighter. Let's go ahead and play it right now.
I talked to a fireman once. This is one of the reasons that freaked me out. And he was telling me, he goes, dude, one day, he goes, it's just going to be the right wind and fire's going to start in the right place and it's going to burn through LA all the way to the ocean. And there's not a fucking thing we can do about it. I go, really? He goes, yeah, we just get lucky. He goes, we get lucky with the wind. He goes, but if the wind hits the wrong way, it's just going to burn straight through LA and there's not going to be a thing we can do about it. Because these fires are so big, dude. When they're talking about like thousands of acres that are burning simultaneously with like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And the wind's just blowing embers through the air, and those embers are landing on roofs, and those houses are going up, and they're landing on bushes, and those bushes are going up, and everything's dry. And once it happens in a way where it's so spread out that there's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do.
You just have to.
Okay, so, there's been many fires in Altadena's history, okay, going all the way back. If you want to look at some of these, so here's a short history. So if you look at Altadena, it's really a great history. People used to move here to escape the big city and have fresh air, and they'd have these sanitariums that actually one of my great-grandmothers went to recover from tuberculosis. So the natural hygienic approach to illness, right, which is what I'm all about. And it's funny because my great-grandmother actually did that. But in this area called Lavinia, there was a sanitarium. The one my great-grandmother went to was in Monrovia, but this used to be a sanitarium where it's just open air, living, and people would recover from illness by escaping the big city and all the pollution. So this actually burned in 1935. Okay, so there's a big fire that burned through. And so fires are very common here. Okay, I mean, if you look at it, our sort of ecosystem is the Mediterranean scrubland, and the plants within a scrubland have adapted to fires. So like the California poppy, it has like a coating on its seed that it's like a fire retardant thing, and then once that burns, it germinates better. So the whole ecosystem here is so used to fires that it's just part of the landscape. Okay, and they've been going on forever. And the Santa Ana winds have also been going on for a while. Okay, they used to call it I forget where I read this, but the settlers would call it the devil winds. Okay, and in my lifetime, there's been many of these winds where the whole house is kind of rattling and all the windows, and it's very spooky. But to mix that with a fire, okay, which is what Joe Rogan is talking about, it's kind of game over for the firefighters because it's just too much, right? There's too big of a front line, okay? And so we need to think about how we're going to rebuild where we can address those types of fires, where you have the wind and the fires, okay? There's another picture. So this is when I was moving to school in 2009. Okay, the week I was moving out, there's this giant fire through the foothills. It wasn't windy, it didn't reach any houses. And so, in this area, we're sort of used to fires. Okay, they happen, quite often. Okay, but if you mix the fires with the wind, then you have issues. Okay, and so when we rebuild, we have to think about how do we do this where, we can actually not have the firefighters be so vulnerable, but there's some sort of infrastructure that can protect against these spreading embers. And so that's what I want to share some ideas about. So the first place I want to start is here in San Francisco with the infrastructure that they built after their big fires. I think it must have been this earthquake in 1906. It started a fire and then it started spreading because they ran out of water. Okay, and we ran out of water in the Palisades and Altadena. Okay, and so, at our house, we were super lucky because the pool was there. So I was able to get buckets of water from the pool. I wish I had like a pump and a generator pump because the power was also out. But if I had like a generator with a pump, that would have been a way to get water out. I was using buckets, which I was able to put out some small brush fires. But, we were super lucky because we had the pool. If you look at the parts of Altadena that were dense, right? So the higher density, and they didn't have room for pools, this area got hit the hardest, okay? Whereas the area, East Altadena has larger lots and more people have pools. And while there was still a lot of damage, they didn't get hit as hard as this high density areas. And so what we need to do is figure out a way to get backup water. And in San Francisco, they built these cisterns, okay? And so underneath the intersections, they had these giant tanks. They still have them. And so it's like a backup water system in case the actual, the water network goes out. And so I think that if we can rebuild these within the streets, okay, and we're looking at it as this is a defense, not just for Altadena and the Palisades, but for the rest of LA. Because if the wind lasted a couple days, if it kept going, we don't know how deep into LA this would have been. Okay, so if we could invest in this infrastructure, it's more of like a investment into the future of the rest of LA to protect it from fires. So the cool thing is that the LA City, if you just go on their website and you type in rain barrel in the search thing, you'll see that they've had all these programs to try to get people to collect rainwater, okay, already. And so instead of just doing this within the intersections, actual homes can start collecting this. I think the rainwater things are kind of ugly, but what you could do is have these underground, here it is, these underground cisterns where you don't actually see them, okay? And so LA has already been incentivizing people to get these. So here's a program right here where it's a cistern rebate, right? So if we can up this program and have people, when they're rebuilding, to underneath the house in these smaller lots where they don't have room for pools, they can have this underground cistern where they can collect water and have a backup in case there's some event like the fires that creates this big draw on the water supply. Okay, at least we'll have backup water. And then you can pair that, either if you have a pool, you can have some sort of system that has these automated roof sprinklers, not the interior sprinklers, but a sprinkler on the roof. Because when you have these embers flying, they just catch fire, right? And it's such a long front line that the firefighters can't stop it, and it just keeps on spreading. And so we need to automate as much as possible. And if we could have either the people that have pools have a sprinkler system that connects to the pool, because again, the water might go out if there's a huge draw on the water supply. So if you have a backup water with your pool, which we were fortunate to have at our house, but it would be a lot better if it was automated so I wasn't running around with a bucket. And then you also, for the lots that are too small to have a pool, like the ones here in West Altadena, what they could do is be incentivized to get a cistern that goes underneath the house, and then it could connect to something like this. Okay, so again, the LA city has already been incentivizing people to collect water. They give rebates for these rain barrels, and they give rebates for the cisterns. Okay, but what we should do is really up this program, because again, we are protecting the rest of the city. Okay, and if you mix a wind event with a fire event, there's no way the firefighters can stop it. And so if we have these automated systems, okay, it would be like a defense that nobody has to even be involved and be there. Now, the other problem though is that the power went out, and they do that because they want to stop the electrical lines from falling over and catching fires. The power went out, and with the power, the communication, the internet, all that kind of stuff went out. Okay, my parents had, the hotspot. So basically, here's what happened. The fire started, the power went out, and my parents didn't know there was a fire. Okay, and they got their hotspot, and they tried to hook up, the Apple TV or whatever to watch more. They were in the middle of some show, and it wasn't until my grandfather called them, and he said that he was having a hard time reaching them because the cell network was so strapped, because, as soon as you shut all the power, all the cell towers in Altadena, then they're reaching down to Pasadena or wherever. And, there's lower bandwidth when that happens. And so my grandfather was calling over and over because he was watching the news, and he finally got through and informed them that there was a fire. So, if we want to have an automated system that ideally could be controlled by your smart devices or whatever, we also need to have backup power and backup communications. So if you could have a solar roof with one of the battery packs, or a backup generator that I know a lot of people have that just kicks on when the power goes out. Okay, that is also another thing that's really important. Okay, so you have backup power that has enough capacity to be able to power like a router and some sort of smart system, so that you can monitor with the security cameras, and you can monitor and control when your sprinklers are going. Because if you just leave them going, and if you only have a small tank, it's not going to, you're going to run out of water, basically. It's not going to last. And so if we could have sort of like this intelligent system, you could control it from an app, you can monitor the situation as the fire gets closer, you can start your sprinklers, and you can monitor how much water is in your cistern. And then you have a solar panel with communications, a satellite antenna perhaps, like the Starlink. Then we can start to really build like this fireproof layer on LA, where this stuff won't spread. So anyways, that's some of my ideas. I think the biggest thing is to have these incentive program for these cisterns, and then also just rebuilding with fireproof materials. Okay, our house, I think one of the reasons it survived is because it was built in like the 1920s or something, and they used cement, like, I don't know if it's cinder blocks or whatever, but when you tap the wall, it's like cement. And so if a flame hits that, it just kind of, nothing happens. But if you have wood, and if you have all these materials that are more combustible, it just catches fire. Okay, so different roofs that are not made out of wood, building out of cinder blocks and stone instead of out of wood. These are the types of things that I think the government could do a real favor in sort of incentivizing people to use those materials. And that's how we can sort of create this epidermis layer in the foothills. Okay, and then also these cisterns, right? Because the firefighters had no water. And so I know in the Palisades, people are complaining that the big reservoir was out of water, and that if we had that, it would have been good. Then that maybe is enough. But, you know, having this sort of decentralized network of cisterns is also good, because in case something happens with one of the connections to that big reservoir, at least you'd have these little, you know, decentralized reservoirs. Okay, and so in San Francisco, they already built this a long time ago, and I think we should take some of the, you know, inspiration from this in order to build these cisterns within our foothills. Okay, and then also if we could underground the power lines as much as possible, because that's likely what caused it, right? So here's a picture of the power lines in the foothills that sparked the, and we don't know if it was something underneath the power lines or if it was the power lines, who knows, right? But it looks like it was a spark from the power lines that started this, and then the wind blew the embers and then it spread, okay? So anyways, there's a lot of different things we can do to prevent, but this is what we're up against, right? You need to have a system that can fight against these flying embers. And I think a sprinkler system is the way to go. Okay, this one might be a little bit too, you know, hardcore of an example, but this is great, right? Why not have these kinds of things? I think the better ones are like these, right? Where it's just built onto the house. It's something that each homeowner has instead of like a, you know, missile defense system that the city provides. But why not, right? If we can do this, why not? You could have a bunch of these things up in the foothills right alongside, right? So as much automation as possible, I think, is the key. But then you also have to have backup water, which we can get with the cisterns. You have to have backup power, which you could do with solar panels, and backup communication, which you could do with satellite internet, like Starlinks. Okay, so that's sort of my ideas. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in another one. Bye.